He built the house that other stars lived in. Look at the history books. You see the Backstreet Boys. You see NSYNC. They became legends. But they followed a map drawn by a kid from Waco, Texas. He was the prototype. He was the first. Gravity pulls hardest on the ones who fly high. Picture the early 90s. The radio plays a new sound. It is smooth like silk, but hits like a hammer. One voice stands out above the rest. It is high. It is clear. It carries the pain of a grown man, but comes from the throat of a teenager. Tony Thompson was not just a singer. He was the heart of the group High Five. Here is the deal. Jive Records used his success to build an empire. They took his style, they took his formula, then they signed other groups to perfect it. Tony changed the game. He influenced a generation. But while the world danced to his music, a shadow grew behind him. The lights of the stage can blind you to the edge of the cliff. What happens when the music stops and the silence is the only thing left? It starts in the heat. Picture a small town in Texas. The map calls it Waco. The year is 1975. The date is September 2nd. A baby boy takes his first breath. His mother names him Tony Thompson. He looks like any other child born that day. He cries. He sleeps. He grows. But inside his chest, a fire waits to burn. Waco is not Hollywood. It is not New York City. It is a place of dust and long roads. It is a place where dreams can dry up under the sun. But it is also a place of faith. Most legends begin in the same room. They begin in the church. Tony found his path early. He joined the youth choir. He was small. He stood among the other children. But when he opened his mouth, the air in the room changed. The sound did not match the boy. It was not a child's voice. It was heavy. It was rich. It carried a soul that felt ancient. The people in the pews sat up straighter. They fanned themselves a little faster. The ladies in the hats nodded their heads. They knew what they were hearing. They call it the anointing. Here is the deal. You cannot hide a light that bright. The church walls could not hold him. Word began to spread through the town. People whispered about the young kid with the big voice. Tony heard the whispers. He felt the energy. He looked at his life. He looked at his family. He made a decision. He told them he wanted to be a singer. He did not mean he wanted to sing on Sundays. He meant he wanted to sing for the world. He wanted to turn his voice into his ticket out. Tony started the grind. He sang everywhere. If there was a stage, he stood on it. If there was a microphone, he held it. He entered talent shows across the city. He performed at special events. Picture the scene: the smell of floor wax in a school gymnasium, the hum of a cheap speaker. The crowd waits, skeptical. Then Tony sings. He shattered the room every single time. He did not just participate, he dominated. He won the contests. He took home the trophies. It became a routine. He was the golden child of Waco. But wait, it gets harder. Tony needed a challenge. He stopped competing against kids his age. It was too easy. He looked up. He set his sights on the older guys. There was a group in town called Ador. These were not children. They were young men. They had the style. They had the moves. They were the local stars. They were the ones the girls screamed for. Tony went toe-to-toe with them. He was younger. He was smaller. But his voice was the equalizer. Gravity pulls hardest on those who wait. Adore got the break first. Jive Records came calling. They signed the group. Adore became the first act from Waco to get a major deal. They packed their bags. They prepared to leave the town behind. Tony watched them go. Imagine how that feels. You know you are the best. You have the trophies to prove it, but the bus leaves without you. The older guys got the golden ticket. Tony stayed in Waco. He stayed in the dust. But this story has a twist. Usually, when people make it out, they never look back. They forget the ones they left behind. But William Walton was different. William was a member of Adore. He knew Tony. He respected the talent. He saw the hunger in the kids' eyes. Before he left, William made a promise. He told Tony to be patient. He said, "I will help you. Once we get settled, I will reach back." Tony had to trust him. He had to wait. Time passed. The silence of the town felt louder than before. But William Walton was a man of his word. He did not forget. Adore got settled in the music industry. William saw the landscape. He met the players. He found 2 music managers from New York City. Their names were Vinnie Bell and Robert Ford. These men were looking for the next big thing. They wanted a sound that could cut through the noise. William picked up the phone. He told them about the kid in Waco. He told them about the voice that shook the church windows. He set up the meeting. Tony finally got his shot. He stood before Vinnie Bell and Robert Ford. These men had seen it all. They were tough. They knew the business. They did not care about local talent shows. They wanted a star. Tony took a breath. He closed his eyes. He let the note fly. At that moment, the room shrank. The managers looked at each other. They heard the pain. They heard the joy. They heard the future. They realized that William Walton was right. This was not just a singer. This was the foundation of something massive. But here is the catch. Tony was brilliant, but he was just one person. Vinnie Bell and Robert Ford had a bigger vision. They did not just want a solo star. They wanted a movement. They wanted to build a machine that would take over the radio. Tony had the voice. He had the heart. But to build the empire they dreamed of, he would need soldiers. He would need a team. The managers looked at the young prodigy. They saw the raw material for a revolution. They were about to build the group that would change R&B forever. But as Tony stepped onto the path of fame, he did not know the cost. He only saw the lights. He did not see the long shadow stretching out behind him. The managers had the diamond. Now they needed to build the crown. Vinnie Bell and Robert Ford looked at Tony Thompson. They saw a prodigy, but they knew the music business. A solo act is powerful. A group is unstoppable. They looked at history. They studied the greats. They saw the magic of the Jackson 5. They saw the smooth moves of the Temptations. They saw the harmony of the Ink Spots. They wanted to take that old school formula and mix it with the new energy of the streets. They started the search. They needed voices that could blend. They needed dancers who could move. They found the pieces to the puzzle. They named the group High Five. Here is the deal. High Five was not just 5 guys singing songs. They were a carefully built machine. They were designed to take over the world. And the engine of that machine was the kid from Waco. Jive Records saw the vision. They signed the group. This is a moment you need to remember. Jive Records later became a giant. They became the factory for pop stars. But High Five was the first brick in the building. They were the first priority. The year was 1990. The era was changing. The 80s were fading out. A new sound was taking over the radio. They called it New Jack Swing. It was fast. It was funky. It had a hard beat, but the vocals were smooth as butter. High Five fit perfectly. Picture the style. It was the golden age of R&B fashion. The group knew how to switch lanes. One minute, they wore the street clothes. They wore baggy jeans and colorful shirts. They looked like the cool guys from the neighborhood. They looked like the boys you went to school with. Um, then they would flip the script. They would step out in sharp suits. They wore matching ties. They had the polished shoes. They looked like gentlemen. They captured every audience. The girls loved the street look. The mothers loved the suits. They had the market cornered. But wait, the music hits harder. They released their self-titled album, The World Was Not Ready. The song, I Like the Way the Kissing Game hit the airwaves. Listen to the memory. The beat starts with that heavy electronic drum. Then the melody kicks in. It is playful. It is catchy. Then Tony's voice cuts through the noise. He did not sound like a child. He sounded like a professional. He hit the high notes with power. He rode the beat with style. The song exploded. It did not just climb the charts. It conquered them. It went all the way to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. Think about that. This was a group of teenagers. They were black kids from humble beginnings. And they were sitting on top of the entire music industry. They were beating the biggest pop stars in the world. Tony Thompson became the voice of a generation. When he sang She's Playing Hard to Get, the clubs went crazy. When he slowed it down for quality time, the couples hit the dance floor. He had a tone that you could not teach. It was raw. It was real. You could hear the church in his throat. You could hear the Texas dust. Here is the truth that history books often hide. High Five was the blueprint. Look at the timeline. A few years later, Jive Records signed the Backstreet Boys. Then they signed NSYNC. These groups became global icons. They sold millions of records. But they were walking on a path that High Five cleared. Jive Records took the High Five formula. They took the harmonies. They took the dance moves. They took the production style. They packaged it for a white audience and made a fortune. Tony Thompson and his group were the prototype. Without High Five, the boy band craze of the late 90s does not happen the same way. Tony was the original. Success brings a storm. Life moved at light speed for Tony. He went from the dusty roads of Waco to the bright lights of Tokyo. He went from singing in a school gym to performing in sold-out arenas. Imagine the rush. You are young, you are famous, you have money in your pocket. They bought the cars. Picture the luxury sedans with the chrome rims spinning. They bought the jewelry. Gold chains shined under the stage lights. They stayed in the best hotels. They ate the best food. Fans screamed their names. People chased their tour bus for a moment. They felt invincible. They felt like kings. Tony was the center of it all. He was the star. The spotlight followed him everywhere he went. He carried the weight of the group on his shoulders. He carried the hopes of his family. He carried the expectations of the record label. Gravity pulls hardest on the ones who fly high. The view from the top is beautiful, but the air is thin. It is hard to breathe. While the world danced to the music, the pressure was building. Tony was still just a kid. He was growing up in front of millions of strangers. He had no time to be normal. He had no time to make mistakes in private. Every move was watched. Every note was judged. The industry demands perfection. It does not care if you are tired. It does not care if you are lonely. It only cares about the next hit song. The cracks began to form. They were small at first. A missed meeting here, a moment of frustration there, but the foundation was shaking. Tony Thompson had achieved the dream. He was a legend before he was 20 years old. But the higher you climb, the further you have to fall. The lights were blinding him to the edge of the cliff. The music was loud. The applause was deafening. But underneath the noise, a silence was waiting. And the silence was dangerous. The music stopped. The lights went down. And Tony Thompson found himself standing alone in the dark. Here is the deal. Success is a drug. When you are on top of the charts, everyone is your best friend. The phone rings all day. The entourage laughs at every joke. You feel like you can fly. But gravity is always waiting. And for Tony, gravity pulled harder than anyone expected. The first crack in the foundation was the group itself. High Five was a brotherhood, but fame is a poison. Egos started to swell. Money became a wedge. The harmony that made them famous began to sound off-key. They were just kids from Texas, thrust into a world of sharks. They did not have the tools to stay together. In 1994, the unthinkable happened. High Five disbanded. The machine broke down, the 5 fingers of the hand unclenched. Tony was the voice, so he tried to stand on his own. He prepared for a solo career. He had the talent, he had the name. He thought the fans would follow him anywhere. But the industry is cold. Picture the boardroom at Jive Records. The executives looked at the numbers. They looked at the trends. They saw what High Five had built. They saw the blueprint. But they did not want Tony anymore. They wanted the formula, but they wanted to sell it to a different audience. While Tony was working on his solo album, Sexational, released in 1995, his label was busy. They were signing a new group called the Backstreet Boys. They were preparing to launch in sync. They took the dance moves Tony perfected. They took the harmonies Tony led. They packaged it for the pop radio stations. Tony watched his own legacy get stolen. Imagine how that feels. You built the house, but now you are locked outside. You turn on the television and see 5 other guys doing exactly what you did, but they are getting the glory. They are getting the millions. Tony's solo album hit the shelves. It was good. The voice was still there, but the machine was not behind him. The promotion was weak. The radio stations were moving on. The album did not sell like the High Five records. The silence began to creep in. When the applause fades, you are left with your own thoughts. And for a young man who spent his entire adolescence on a stage, those thoughts were heavy. Tony missed the structure. He missed the rush. He needed a way to cope with the rejection. He needed an escape. He did not turn to the usual vices at first. He did not just drink the pain away. He found a darkness that was harder to understand. Here is the tragic turn. Tony fell into a strange and deadly addiction. It was not cocaine. It was not heroin. It was something you could buy at a hardware store. It was huffing. He started inhaling compressed air. He started inhaling Freon. Picture the scene. A grown man, a former superstar, sitting in a car or a small room, the hiss of a canister, the chemical smell filling the air. He breathed in the poison to numb the pain. It gave him a high. It made the world dizzy and slow. It froze the lungs and confused the brain. It was a cheap, dangerous way to turn off the lights in his head. But wait, it gets worse. You cannot hide that kind of damage. The chemical took a toll on his body. It took a toll on his mind. The sharp, charming kid from Waco began to act erratically. He was confused. He was often disoriented. The legal troubles followed. The police got involved. There were arrests. The fans turned on the news and saw a mugshot. They squinted at the screen. Was that the boy who sang, "I Like the Way"? Was that the heartthrob with a bright smile? He looked tired. His eyes were heavy. The spark was gone. The media did not show mercy. They did not ask about his pain. They did not ask about the industry that chewed him up. They just showed the fall. They labeled him troubled. They wrote him off. Tony tried to fight back. He tried to reclaim his spot. He formed a new version of High Five. He toured the small clubs. He sang the old hits. But the magic was fading. The venues were smaller. The crowds were thinner. The voice, that beautiful, anointed voice, was fighting against the damage done to his body. He was singing for survival now. The isolation was the real killer. When the money dries up, the entourage vanishes. The yes men disappear. Tony was left with the consequences of fame, but none of the rewards. He was back in Texas. He was back in the dust. But now he carried the weight of a fallen king. He had touched the sun and he had been burned. The tragedy of Tony Thompson is not just about drugs or bad contracts. It is about a child star who was used as a battery to power a machine. When the battery ran low, the machine replaced him. He was the prototype. He was the first. And like many who go first, he paid the highest price. The shadows lengthened. The year 2007 approached. Tony was still young. He was only in his early 30s. He should have been in his prime. He should have been a legacy act, receiving awards and mentoring the next generation. Instead, he was fighting a battle against his own demons. He was fighting for his breath. The stage was empty. The microphone was off. And the boy from Waco, who once shattered windows with his song, was about to face the ultimate silence. The calendar turned to June 1st, 2007. The sun beat down on Waco, Texas. It was a hot day. The air was thick, but in the shadow of an apartment complex, the world went cold. They found a body near the air conditioning units. It was a man. He was only 31 years old. He wore the clothes of a regular guy. He did not look like a superstar. He did not look like the king of R&B. But it was him. It was Tony Thompson. The police arrived. The yellow tape went up. The news traveled fast. But it traveled differently this time. When I Like the Way the Kissing Game hit #1, the news traveled with joy, it traveled with celebration. This time, the news traveled with shame. Here is the hard truth. The autopsy told the story. His body was filled with toxic chemicals. He had died from inhaling an excessive amount of Freon. He was trying to get high. He was trying to escape the pain one last time. And his heart simply stopped beating. The silence was louder than the applause ever was. Picture the reaction. The internet was becoming a powerful force. Blogs were taking over. People did not react with kindness. They reacted with judgment. The headlines did not say legend dies. They said singer found dead. They focused on the drugs. They focused on the mugshots from years before. They posted the pictures where he looked tired and broken. They did not post the pictures of the fresh-faced kid who charmed the world. The media stripped him of his dignity. They turned a tragedy into a gossip column. But wait, it gets uglier. Look at the industry at that exact moment. The year was 2007. Jive Records, the label that Tony helped build, was on top of the world. Justin Timberlake was a global icon. The Backstreet Boys were wealthy legends. The machine was running perfectly. The pop stars who borrowed Tony's sound were living in mansions. They had the safety nets. They had the rehab centers with ocean views. They had the publicists to spin their stories. Tony died on the concrete in Waco. He was the prototype. He was the one who proved the formula worked. But when the prototype broke, the industry threw it away. They did not try to fix him. They just built newer, shinier models. The hypocrisy makes your stomach turn. The music business loves the art, but it often hates the artist. They love Tony's voice. They love the money he made them, but they did not love the boy behind the microphone. When he needed help, the phone stopped ringing. For the fans, the news hit like a punch to the gut. If you are over 45, you remember where you were. You remember the roller rinks in the 90s. You remember the slow dances. Tony Thompson was the soundtrack to your first crush. He was the voice of your innocence. When he died, a piece of that innocence died too. We looked at the news and we felt old. We felt the weight of time. We wondered how the boy with the golden voice ended up so alone. Gravity pulls us all down eventually, but it seems to pull harder on the ones we love the most. The public reaction shifted slowly. At first, it was shock. Then, it was judgment. But finally, the sadness set in. People began to realize what we had lost. We did not just lose a singer. We lost a pioneer. We lost the man who taught a generation how to sing with soul. We started to see the pattern. We saw it with Frankie Lyman. We saw it with David Ruffin. And now we saw it with Tony Thompson. The bright lights burn the moth. Here is the deal. You cannot rewrite the ending. The tragedy happened. The loss is real. But we do not have to let the tragedy define the man. The tabloids wanted you to remember the Freon. They wanted you to remember the fall. But the people who actually loved him, we chose to remember the rise. We remembered the kid in the church choir. We remembered the suits. We remembered the smile. The silence in Waco was heavy that day. But even death could not silence the records. The music was still there. It was waiting for us to press play. Tony was gone. The industry kept moving. The world kept spinning. But for those who knew the truth, the music never sounded quite the same again. The lights of the stage had faded, but in the darkness, we finally saw the truth. We saw the cost of the crown. They buried his body in the Texas soil, but they could not bury the sound. Here is the deal. History tries to rewrite itself. The music business tries to hide its sins. They want you to look at the shiny gold records on the wall. They want you to look at the billions of dollars made by the pop groups that came later. But we know the truth. Tony Thompson was not a footnote. He was the headline. He was the prototype. Look at the charts in the 90s. Every time you saw a boy band dancing in perfect steps, you were watching a shadow of high five. Every time you heard a young singer run a smooth riff over a hard hip-hop beat, you were hearing an echo of Tony. Jive Records built an empire. They used his style to launch the Backstreet Boys. They used his formula to launch NSYNC. They took the map that Tony drew and they sold it to the world. But they could never replicate the soul. You can teach a dance move. You can buy a suit, but you cannot buy the anointing that came straight from the church in Waco. That came from a place you cannot manufacture. Gravity pulls us down, but music lifts us up. It is easy to judge the fall. It is easy to look at the headlines about addiction and shake your head, but that is cheap. That is lazy. True fans know better. We do not remember the concrete in Waco. We remember the magic. We remember the school dances. We remember the first time we heard I Like the Way, the kissing game, on the radio. We remember how it felt to be young. Tony gave us that feeling. He carried the weight of fame so we could enjoy the show. He gave everything he had until there was nothing left to give. So picture this. You are driving down the road. The radio is on. That famous drum beat kicks in. Do not change the station. Turn it up. Let that high, clear voice fill the car. Tony Thompson was a shooting star. He burned bright, he burned fast, and he left a trail that changed R&B forever. Some stories end without closure, but dignity doesn't need applause. Where were you when you first fell in love with High Five? Share your memories in the comments below. Let's keep his legacy alive.